Simon.
Since we're expecting something from the International Court of Justice tomorrow. This is your last briefing, I presume, before then. I wonder, could you tell us whether, the US has obviously said the South African case against Israel is meritless, but you also said, in your statements related to the case that the ICJ is an important judicial organ, plays a vital role in peaceful settlement of disputes. So, ahead of this ruling, is there anything you would say regarding, if provisional measures are sort of advised by the court, should parties abide by them?
I would not opine on anything like that, given that this is a legal process, and I'm not going to hypothesize or speculate on any kind of outcome. What I will just say again, and we spoke to this when the arguments are ongoing, is that the allegations that Israel is committing genocide we believe to be unfounded, but simultaneously we will continue to make clear with our partners in Israel that they not only need to comply with international humanitarian law as it conducts this operation against Hamas, but they also have a moral and strategic imperative to take feasible steps, additional steps, to prevent civilian harm, and that they also have a responsibility to investigate credible allegations of violations of international humanitarian law when they arise. But I'm not going to get ahead of the process on this.
Does following international humanitarian law extend to following international law when one of the world's courts that can enforce international law rules on something? Should countries be expected to follow that?
I'm just I have no way to ascertain or guess what the ruling might be, so I'm just going to refrain from commenting.
But that suggests that you're waiting to see what the decision will be, and then you'll decide whether you agree with the verdict or not. If you don't agree with it, then you'll say no. But yet, in many other cases, particularly one that comes to mind is China and the Philippines and the South China Sea.
You have called for the Chinese to respect those decisions. Are you saying now that you're withholding judgment on whether countries should obey?
Not at all. Not at all. Over the course of this,
the ICJ?
Over the course of this, we have been pretty clear that it's our expectations that all parties, including the government of Israel, comply with international humanitarian law. I will note, though, that throughout all of this, Hamas certainly has not been. But what I'm saying is I'm not going to opine on any forthcoming ruling on this, and I will reiterate again that at the crux of this, when these arguments started the week before last, that was rooted in this notion that and these allegations that Israel is committing genocide, and I will say again that we find those allegations to be unfounded.
But in general, when a court is ruling on something, you can argue that you don't agree with South Africa's argument, but it sort of undermines the legitimacy of the whole system if the US is not saying ahead of time whether this ruling is meaningful or whether you would expect countries to follow it. And just to note, Hamas has said that they would follow, if the ICJ demanded a ceasefire, they would follow it. I haven't seen that statement from the Israelis.
Hamas has also said that they would release hostages, and they've not done so in that regard as well, Simon. So I sort of take issue with your question, reflecting Hamas as some kind of fair or credible interlocutor or actor in this. Again, I will just say, and you've heard me say this before, our expectation is that Israel needs to and must comply with international humanitarian law, but I'm not going to get ahead of tomorrow's or any expected ruling on this. Sure, go ahead, Saeed.
Thank you. Now, but of course, Hamas did release some hostages, back in the last week of November, correct? They did release hostages.
There have been releases of hostages previously, but they have not followed through on their broader commitment or claims that they would release hostages. There continue to be quite a number of individuals being held hostage, including Americans, who continue to be unaccounted for, Saeed.
Right. And responding to Simon, you said that, you know, we know that Hamas committed all these atrocities and so on, and crimes, which, you know, qualify as crime by the court, possibly. I don't know. I'm not a legal expert. But let me ask you this. I mean, Hamas does not get $4 billion a year. There's not a state. Does not get endless political cover and protection and so on from the United States of America. So are you saying that Hamas, Israel should behave exactly like Hamas? Is that what you're saying?
That's not at all what I'm saying. That's not what I said, Said.
That's how it came across.
Earlier, I don't think that's how it came across. And earlier this week, I was pretty clear that there is also no moral equivalency between the terrorist group Hamas and the government of Israel. And that since October 7th, we have not hesitated. We've not been ambiguous. We have been very front and center about the fact that we expect Israel to comply with international humanitarian law. We believe that additional steps need to be taken to protect civilians, and that is a moral and strategic imperative as Israel continues to conduct this operation.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, it's the 111th day of this war. There is, you know, untold amount of evidence that proves whatever case you want to prove, and so on. You believe that all along, all throughout these raids, these attacks, by whatever weapons, Israel has abided by the laws of war that you subscribe to?
I'm not a legal scholar either, Saeed, so I'm not going to opine on something like that from up here. On your comment about the duration of this, there is certainly a convergence between a lot of countries, including Israel, of wanting to see this conflict end as soon as possible. Hamas could lay down its arms. Hamas could stop co-locating itself with civilian infrastructure like schools and hospitals and apartment buildings. That certainly could help bring a swifter conclusion to this conflict. But again, there is no moral equivalency, of course, between the terrorist group Hamas and the government of Israel, and we will continue privately, publicly, diplomatically, in every conversation that we have with the Israeli government about the moral and strategic imperative that they have to take additional steps to minimize civilian casualties as it continues to conduct this operation.
Yeah, I have a couple more questions, but conversely, Israel could also pull out its forces and stop bombing civilian areas. That would end the war, wouldn't it?
We have been direct with them, with the government of Israel, on their need to comply with international humanitarian law and on their need to take additional steps to minimize civilian casualties.
I want to ask you about the Palestinian